Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Senator George Cabrera. And got to read a brief announcement before we begin. So in the interest of safety, I would ask you to note the location of and access to the exits in the hearing room. Two doors through which you're into the room are the emergency exits and are marked with exit signs. In an emergency, the door behind legislators can also be used. In the event of an emergency, please walk quickly to the nearest exit after exiting the room, proceed to the main stairs or follow the exit signs to one of the fire stairs. Please quickly exit the building and follow any instructions from the Capitol Police. Do not delay and do not return unless you are advised that it is safe to do so. In the event of a lockdown announcement, please remain in the hearing room and stay away from the exit doors until an all clear announcement is heard. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Insurance and Real Estate Committee meeting. Looking forward to a good public hearing. And before we begin, to see any opening remarks from my rankings. Mr. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm eager to get started. And for those that aren't familiar, there are many other committees going on. So committee members are bustling about through the legislative office building. So just for your reference, many of our colleagues are online and following up on materials. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any opening remarks from my co-chair?
Thanks everyone for being here. Looking forward to the testimony today.
Representative Berry, any opening remarks?
Happy to be here. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. All right, we'll get rolling. Sure. First on the list is Senator Summers, who I believe is joining us remotely.
Yes,
Senator,
good morning. I'm hoping you can all hear me.
you can.
Great. I am here providing testimony in support of Senate Bill 1015, an act prohibiting life insurance companies from discriminating against first responders diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Senator Cabrera, Representative Wood, Senator Wong, Representative Pavlik-D'Amato, and distinguished members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee. First responders dedicate their lives to the safety of our neighborhoods. On any given day, police officers, parole officers, and firefighters can experience any of the following events: witnessing the death of a person, witnessing an injury that causes the death of a person shortly after, treating an injured person who dies shortly after, carrying an injured person who dies shortly after, viewing a deceased minor, witnessing an incident that causes a person to lose a body part or to suffer loss of function that results in permanent disfigurement. First responders often experience more trauma in one day than many of us will experience in our entire lifetimes. Those traumatic experiences can understandably lead to mental and physical trauma. Some would even say more so than those who suffer through combat, because our first responders live in the communities that they treat injured persons, that sometimes they must drive by the scene that they just witnessed a traumatic injury over and over again. I know this committee believes that we should do all that we can to help our first responders who experience PTSD, and that's why this bill is so important. I have heard firsthand, and you will hear from him later today, from a first responder, not in my district, but someone who reached out to me, who has been diagnosed with PTSD. He sought medical treatment for suicidal ideation. He did the right thing. He got treatment, he got help, and now he has dedicated his life to helping others. He was a decorated police officer, I believe a sergeant, a canine handler, someone who testified in murder cases for, I believe, the state police in the past. He was a father, a mentor, a coach. And one day, all that he had seen, all the trauma came to a head, and he had to seek help. He got it and was prescribed medication for PTSD. Because of that, his healthcare provider, after recording the medication he was on, when he went to seek life insurance, he was denied. His coverage was dropped. And he was denied specifically because of the medication he was taking to treat PSD. Once a denial for life insurance, no other life insurance would even consider him. I believe he will share with you today, he went to every insurance company possible to carry life insurance, because life insurance is one of the most selfless things we can do for our family. And he was repeatedly and continually denied because he had sought treatment for PTSD. It is even more important now that we have passed the police accountability bill, which requires our police officers to seek treatment and to talk to a counselor concerning their trauma and any other issues that they may be having. God forbid a police officer, first responder now seeks the treatment they need and has medication to help that. They will be denied life insurance repeatedly. I believe that's counter to what this legislature wanted to do as far as allowing police officers to seek the help that they may need. This legislation before you would help prevent
Senator, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your 3 minutes have eclipsed. Please summarize.
Okay, I'm going to do that right now. This legislation will help prevent this from happening in the future to any other first responder diagnosed with PTSD. And I thank you for your consideration in raising SB 1050. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions, Senator Huang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Summers, for raising this very important point. Now, you mentioned the case point of rejection. So indeed, every application he made, he was rejected. Would you be adverse if insurance carriers gave that policy but added additional cost relative to the actuarial risk? Or are you looking to have that information precluded in an underwriting process?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Currently, when Brian, who you'll hear from later today, was denied, he was denied specifically because he was treated for PTSD. And you will hear in his testimony, once denied from one insurance company, it spreads like wildfire. So no other insurance company will carry you, because one of the questions is, have you ever been denied life insurance? But the specific reason, and he has the paperwork to show, is because he was treated for PTSD. I'm looking for any way that he is able, him and future folks that will be in this position, hopefully not, will be able to carry life insurance. Because he was treated for PTSD, he was denied life insurance. He would be willing to pay for life insurance, but he cannot get life insurance. He is denied. No one will carry him. You will hear that he went to agent after agent, and the same response from the agents and the insurance companies: denied because of treatment for PTSD and the medication that he was prescribed actually for sleeping during the time that he was being treated for PTSD. I'm looking for any solution that will prevent this from happening to any first responder in the future.
Thank you for that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Senator Summers, for bringing this forward. I wanted to hear your testimony, but I just co-signed onto the bill. At some point, we have to stop stigmatizing mental health. PTSD is trauma related. It is not an indicator that you are going to kill yourself or you are going to self-harm. It is a medical diagnosis that needs treatment. I have a brother who's a 2-time Afghan vet, came home with PTSD. He's a nurse. He takes care of other people. This is not a lifelong sentence. This is something that we need to help people and adjust for, and denying them life insurance it's reprehensible. It's not, again, this is not an indicator of future behavior. This is a mental health diagnosis that is treatable and very, very survivable. So I am 100% on board with this bill, and I think we need to stop and consider whether we are asking people who are enduring trauma to have lifelong suffering and be discriminated against because of that trauma, when we specifically ask and put them in those positions, whether they're police or military or anything else. So I am now a huge advocate for your bill, and I will help in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can respond to that, one of the things I didn't have an opportunity to say was that if this continues on this trajectory as it is currently today, you will have police officers and first responders going for treatment that they are required to go for now, but they will not be sharing how they're truly feeling, because they will be fearful they will not be able to get life insurance. You will hear for the life insurance companies that this isn't true, but we have the paperwork to show that it is. They say they want you to get treatment. That's exactly what Brian did. He sought treatment. He had suicidal thoughts. He was treated. He is better. He's written a book. He wants to help others who have gone through this process. And during that time, he ended up getting divorced. Part of his divorce decree was to carry life insurance. So he spent years in violation of his divorce decree because he had no ability to carry life insurance.
You bring up a very good point too. With the police accountability bill, we require police officers, and just last year, we passed legislation to make it so they had a more private area where they could go and share the trauma that they're doing. If we're going to penalize them for that, we can't pass one law that says you have to do this. You have to have this mental health treatment and then allow something like this that's going to disqualify them and their families. I would wonder what that does to all the police in the state of Connecticut who fall under police accountability, who also have life insurance as a benefit from the state. This then voids their life insurance policy if what this officer and what Heather is bringing forward is accurate. We're telling them they have to do something, and then we're going to again penalize them and their families from a life insurance perspective. So that's very concerning. I think it's definitely unintended consequences of the bill, and we should try to fix that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your time and your testimony.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Next, we have Susan Marucci, who's remote. I'm sorry, Jessica Simpson. She canceled. Is Ms. Simpson on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Simpson. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Carrera, Representative Wood, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and Representative Nuccio for championing this legislation. My name is Jessica Simpson. I'm the Senior Public Policy Specialist with the Humane Society of the United States, here in strong support of House Bill 6635. Despite the industry's historical reliance on using actuarial justification to make determinations about homeowner and renter insurance policies, many insurers have been using unreliable and incomplete data to deny, cancel, or increase premiums based not on the individual behavior of an animal, but on assumptions about a breed of dog or their perceived breed. The result of breed-based barriers is that consumers are either underinsured, left with questions about why they've been denied and what options they have, or forced to relinquish their beloved family dog in pursuit of coverage. HB 6635 will help ensure that the industry uses objective facts free of cultural biases to determine whether an individual dog poses a risk, which is explicitly permitted within this bill. While the intent of breed lists may not have been overtly discriminatory, the intent does not negate outcome. Studies have found a link between breed-specific policies and race, with several concluding that these laws or policies are byproducts of animus against owners of such breeds, or at least their perceived owners. And it isn't just scholars who recognize this connection. The National Black Caucus of State Legislators adopted a resolution condemning breed-specific policies, stating they believe them to be discriminatory in nature. The data the industry currently relies on is bad, in part because of the inherent flaws in its collection. When breed is reported after an incident, typically someone is using visual identification to make that determination. Studies have shown there's significant discrepancy between visual assessment of a breed and the actual genetic determination of the dog's breed, even when the visual assessment is conducted by individuals who have substantial experience working with dogs. Additionally, there's no opportunity for analysis without a comparable data set. It's impossible to compare households with dogs whose insurers have paid out a claim due to a bite versus households with dogs that have no such claim against them. Essentially, there are too many unknown factors. Further, there's no accurate mechanism measuring how many different breeds of dogs live in a particular city or county, much less a state. The legislature already regulates the insurance industry and has an interest in ensuring policies that may have a disparate impact on marginalized groups are not permitted. Finally, regarding some of the opposition that you might hear today, I'd like to note that the National Council of Insurance Legislators, a legislative organization comprised of insurance stakeholders, was presented many of the very arguments that were provided in some of the written testimony, considered them, and nonetheless passed model legislation aiming to do what's been presented here. The experts agree that the best predictor of a dog's behavior comes from an evaluation of individual adult dogs, not selection based on breed. Policies that affect the ability of families to find housing in Connecticut should reflect this truth and prohibit discrimination against families based on their pets. For those reasons, we ask HB 66 is moved forward favorably, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions, Representative Wood?
Thank you for your testimony. Have you heard from people specifically who've had to either give up their pet or any other consequences from the bill, this law as it currently stands?
Yes, and I think that some of the other folks that are testifying here today can speak to that as well. In the experience that I've had working in a shelter and my experience as an employee of an organization that helps shelters, we frequently hear that there are tons of barriers to keeping your pets, especially when it comes to housing. And often sort of the blame is placed on the inability to secure insurance that permits a specific type of breed. And that results in a surrender or
Also,
rehoming.
do you see people bypassing adopting certain dog breeds because they're worried about being able to keep them in the place where they live?
Shelters will often have to either deny applications, or people will, after finding a dog that they do think would be a good member of their family, have to turn that opportunity away because they find out that their insurance won't cover them. I have heard from people who are both low income and don't have very many options, as well as people who are sort of your middle income standard family who call insurance company after insurance company and are refused coverage based on the fact that they have this particular dog on one of the prohibited breed lists, not based on any kind of action of the dog in the past or their previous behavior.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Nuccio?
I'm going to keep it brief. I just wanted to say thank you for coming and testifying in support of this bill. It's worked on it for, I don't know, about last 18 months plus at NCOIL, passed the model legislation, and I'm very glad that the leaders of this committee decided to let us bring it forward. And I hope to hear from a lot of positive people today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Simpson, for coming to testify today. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Up next is Susan Marucci, followed by Claire Irvine. Ms. Marucci?
Okay, start video. Sorry about that.
It's okay, you're good.
Good morning, committee and committee chairs. My name is Susan Marucci, and I live in Sandy Hook. I am the AKC delegate for the Newtown Kennel Club. I am a member of the Colonial Rottweiler Club, which is the oldest AKC Rottweiler breed club, which was established in 1956. I am also a member of the Connecticut Valley Vizsla Club, the Vizsla Club of Greater New York, and the Vizsla Club of America. I have owned Rottweilers since 2011. My husband, Michael, has owned Rottweilers since 1990. He is an AKC Breeder of Merit in Rottweilers, and we both are recognized as Breeders of Merit in Vizslas. We currently live with 2 Rottweilers, but have had numerous Rottweilers in our home over the years. We have lived with best in specialty winning Rottweilers, numerous AKC champions, Rottweilers that are titled in obedience, rally, canine good citizen, and therapy dog. My husband bought his home in 2006. And at the time, the only company that would insure him was State Farm. Since then, over the years, he has searched for other companies, and his inquiries have been received with prejudice because of the breed. This needs to change. Secondly, I would like to speak on behalf of the Newtown Kennel Club. Some people in our club have discussed the House Bill 6635, and some members have expressed their concerns about the breeds that they own. Many members who own other breeds that are not on this list, this prohibitive list, and deemed dangerous, have had their homeowners insurance policies canceled or not renewed based on the number of dogs that they own. These decisions are being made completely arbitrarily without substantiating reasons. For example, no claims, no complaints, nor have there been any municipal interactions or fines. People who own a dog that match these vague physical characteristics should not be discriminated against because of the breeds or the likeness to the breeds that they choose to live with in relation to housing, insurance, and rehoming. We own well-mannered Rottweilers that are part of the community. Recently, I attended the AKC Meet the Breeds at the Javits Center in New York City with our young female Rottweiler. She was there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sunday, and watching people interact with her and all the other dogs that were there is truly remarkable. You know, it speaks volumes for the breed, and we should not be penalized for owning these breeds. That's it. That's all I have. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Senator Wong has a question or a comment.
Hi, Ms. Marucci. I don't know you realize, but you had a guest appearance behind your screen. Quite cute.
Yes, that's one of our, that's our
There she is.
girl. Yeah, there's Rizzo.
Thank you for testifying and thank you for your great work in the Kennel Club in Newtown. I'm very familiar with it and the good work that you all do. Has this policy always existed, or was it a recent phenomenon in the insurance exclusionary practices?
I believe it's been ongoing. I'm not positive, to be honest. I just know when I came to live here in Newtown in 2011, it was already problematic then. You know, I had always owned Vizslas, and it wasn't something I needed to worry about, honestly, until I started owning Rottweilers. But I think it's been an ongoing problem and difficulty for people that, you know, have been trying to get insurance. I mean,
think
I do know.
I think you raise a very important point that when you were raising the Vizslas, it was never a problem. It seems like the Rottweilers and the various breeds that are on this list sometimes seem to get a very bad rap and quite unjustified in some cases. Can you articulate that as a breeder and understanding the temperament? And I've always grown up with the attitude that pets unprovoked are happy on their way, but when they're provoked, they react. But can you talk a little bit from your experience as a breeder, in this case, the Rottweiler, their temperament and their disposition?
So their temperaments, they should be standoffish. They should not they should be welcoming, but also let people know that this is their territory or their home. When you breed, especially Rottweilers for us, nowadays, we have to take into consideration that the majority of our litter is going to be placed in pet homes. So you need proper socialization at a young age. You need follow-up care. And, you know, it really starts in the whelping box. If you breed to a dog that has a strong desire to work, regardless of it doesn't have to be bite work, but even obedience, even agility, those high drive dogs need to be placed in the homes, the families that are best suited for them. So it does start, for us at least, in the whelping box. And all you can do is hope that your puppy people follow up with the proper training and socialization so that they can become a welcomed citizen within the community.
I appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Representative Donicki.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susan, you made a mention of a prohibited list. Can you enumerate the breeds that are on that list?
Well, when I researched this, wasn't recently, this was a few years back. They were the Cane Corso, the German Shepherd, the Rottweiler, the Mastiff, Bull Mastiff, Doberman Pinscher. I have not looked. I did not do research prior to this hearing.
Would it be safe to say that a function of the dog's disposition is a function of the actual training and raising of the animal?
Yes. Yes, I believe so. I mean, some are going to be more domineering and protective, but the Rottweiler breed is supposed to be protective, but they should also be engaging and fun to live with. But it starts out very early, and some of those traits that could potentially escalate to danger are usually can be subsided and at an early age with proper socialization.
And as a breeder, do you make people aware of this situation?
Absolutely. The screening process is very difficult because you really need to have people that understand the breed and are willing and obviously strong. They're a big breed. Like our girl is 92 pounds. Our boy is about 110. So, experience in the breed or in working breeds in general is a priority for us as breeders. You just don't want to sell a puppy to a person that just wants a dog because they want him for protection, because that's when something's going to happen. If you want a dog purely to protect your home, you're not going to do the proper socialization and training that's required to make them a healthy part of your family.
Well, thank you for coming forward with your testimony, and I appreciate the information. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments? Nope, seeing none. Ms. Marucci, thank you for your testimony.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Up next is Ms. Claire Irvine, followed by Nicole Juchum. Good morning. Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Representative Wood, Senator Cabrera, Senator Hong, and the members of the committee here, both joining us here, and I'm sure tuning in from other location, for giving me the opportunity to come and testify in support of bill number 6621. It's a bill to effectively streamline the process of renewing surplus lines insurance policies. It sounds much more complex than it is. For most insurance policies are placed in the admitted market. Well, first of all, I represent the Professional Insurance Agents of Connecticut. It's a trade association of independent insurance agents from across the state. They work with a number of carriers to ensure that their clients get the best policies, and their goal is to maintain clients over decades, ideally with the clients referring business to them. It's built on trust. For the vast majority of their clients, the best policies are in the admitted market, which is highly regulated. Those are the insurance policies you see advertised on television, and most people buy to insure their homes, cars, and other and small businesses. However, exceptional risks just don't exist in the admitted market, and the surplus lines market exists to cover everything else. In order to access these policies, though, it either has to be on a designated list of risks that would just be too risky in any case to ever be in the admitted market, such as amusement parks, a dynamite factory, fireworks vendors for the 4th of July. Other risks for mostly are in the admitted market, but the outliers are too high risk or too high value to be in that market. For those policies, there's three insurance agent must get 3 declinations from admitted market carriers. This ensures that the agent, it's not simply one carrier doesn't cover it, but all the array of carriers don't offer that coverage. It's a balance between checking multiple sources, but at the same time, they can't check every possible admitted carrier and still be selling insurance. Once they get the 3 declinations, they can get the policy in the surplus lines market. Our bill, they then have to go through those declinations on renewal. Our bill is simply to remove that declinations process when they renew the policy with the same carrier in the surplus lines market. The admitted agents, they know what policies the carriers have an appetite for. The carriers are very upfront with what their underwriting standards are, whether it's the amount of property they're going to cover, the size business, the level of risk. Our agents are aware of that upfront. So when they're looking at these policies for renewal, they already know through the day-to-day work in their profession that those policies don't exist. The declinations process is a completely separate step that requires getting names from the insurance carriers and sign off from those individuals at the carriers that they won't provide this coverage. The agent already knows that and can confirm it without going through the steps. The bill is simply to streamline it to ensure that when they're renewing the process, they're able to focus on obtaining the best policies for their clients rather than effectively double checking all of this work, which is unnecessary just due to technology and changes in the business. And so for those reasons, we strongly support this legislation. And we also submitted written testimony that you should have access to, or it will be coming shortly, further emphasizing these points. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Irvine. I think Representative Wood has a question for you.
Hi, good morning. Thank
morning.
you for being here. So can you just walk us through the declination timeframe? So you're required to get 3.
Mhm.
What's the time, energy, hours, money that goes into getting those 3?
It really depends. I'm sure everyone has had interactions with effectively third parties in some sense. It's sometimes it can be really quick. Some insurance carriers have effectively designated people to be handling this. For other insurance carriers, it can take an extended period of time to get that sign off from a specific named person. It just depends. And some of that even just depends on the time of year. If it's the time of year where a lot of policies are renewal, it takes just more time, and that just delays the process of being able to file the paperwork to renew the surplus lines policy.
Does that time mean additional money for people that are looking for these policies? Is that like bundled into
It can
the
be
final coverage that they end up getting? Is it driving up cost getting the 3 declinations?
I mean, it has the potential if somehow this declinations were to slow down the renewal process, just because it's there's effectively about a 60 window time frame for renewing policies. And if you go too far into that time frame and there's an issue, that can have the potential to drive up cost.
Okay. How do you get a declination? Is it through like a website? Like what technology is it calling someone on the phone?
It's calling someone on the phone. And that's part of why it made a lot of sense when that was how policies were coded. It was an agent calling the carrier directly. That now they use online portals. So it's not, for instance, Representative Barry saying, oh, sorry, but we can't provide coverage for this. It's the computer, or even before the computer, the guidelines that they send out to agents. So the agents know ahead of time, hey, this is what we're covering. This way, you know what we're also not covering, and can focus on finding that best policy.
So I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second. So I'm a dynamite manufacturer and I'm making a certain amount of product, and then I've, trying to get insurance coverage. Yeah, 3 declinations happened, but then my business expanded 3-fold. Wouldn't we want to, have the 3 declinations because the business has changed?
Yes. First of all, I apologize for not clarifying earlier. When it's a risk on the exportable list, such as the dynamite factory, the declinations wouldn't apply. It's acknowledged by that those just wouldn't exist in mid-market. So I apologize for not clarifying that. But even those policies just wouldn't be renewed. Those policies wouldn't be renewed if for instance, coastal property were to decide to add on a large wing, the insurance carrier wouldn't renew it on the same terms. And so that would go back and have the declinations. If a business business expands from one location to 5, that would not be a renewal. Therefore, they would still go back to the declinations. And then when that policy were to expire and there weren't changes, it would renew it. Then it would be renewed.
Right. And just one last quick question. Are these policies in place for a year? So these declinations would be required every year?
Normally, yes. Normally an insurance policy would be a year, but it would be the term of the policy. So if it were some risk are just to have different policy, different timeframes based on their needs. So then it would just be based on that timeframe. But if it's a annual policy, it would be an annual renewal.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments?
Rep Meskers has his hand up online.
Oh, Rep Meskers, welcome to Zoom.
Thank you very much. I want to understand correctly what you're proposing here in terms of declination. So it's close to an automatic renewal on consistent policy, and what's that window look like? So walk me through the process of who would actually, like the nature of the almost this auto renew versus the decline, like what gets excluded in broad strokes. You want to repeat that to me so I can understand the ask?
Yeah, it wouldn't be surplus lines wouldn't be automatically renewed, but it would effectively allow the admitted insurance agent and the surplus lines broker to just fill out the paperwork themselves. So it just gives them a level of control where they know that policy can be renewed at the same terms, no real changes. They know there's no other policies out there. They can just fill out the paperwork. The surplus lines broker would be still required to submit that to the insurance department to make it trackable. But it wouldn't automatically renew in the way a streaming subscription automatically renews, where you discover you've had it for 3 years. It's still, the agent has to still do paperwork. This agent still has to actively renew it. The surplus lines broker who specializes in these policies would still have to actively renew it and file paperwork. It's just working with the third parties that can create delays. It's just streamline the process to take advantage of the fact that technology has allowed them all to know a lot better what's going on in the market and make it easier and more straightforward to ensure that their clients are keeping the policies that adequately are exactly what they requested and cover their property, their business, or other risk.
So there's still going to be at some point a physical review of the policy by the insurance carriers. Are not going to get hoodwinked, if you will, as an insurance carrier. And at the same time, the personnel who are looking for the insurance policy, it gives them more surety that their renewal process is streamlined. Is that what we're suggesting here?
Correct. It's just trying to balance out to make it efficient, but at the same time, again, people actively have to renew it. From the carriers are closely following this. The surplus lines broker would still be filing the paperwork that they're required to on the policy renewal. The the property and casualty agent or insurance agent working with the client would still be keeping track of the renewal, still be keeping track of how it fits in the market, because for them, they really do want the best deal. They really want the best policy at the best price, the best fit for their clients. So they actively make sure that their client can get that. This is just making it straightforward they know they can take advantage of their knowledge of the market, fill out the paperwork, pass that along to the surplus lines broker to fill out the paperwork, and not have to do completely separate at this point steps that only exist for the declinations solely for the renewing the policy.
So ultimately, then we kind of expedite the process, and then the bill is presented to the client with the outlined coverage, and the client still has to sign and pay a check to renew the coverage, right?
Correct.
So it's not like anybody. So it's an expedited versus it's the title of the bill that confuses me at some point, right? I mean, you're trying to expedite the application, the solicitation of the bids, the closing of a deal. The client ultimately has to pay for the insurance for the policy to go into effect. And the insurance broker and the insurance company has to agree to cover it.
Yep.
So we're just trying to speed those processing points in the middle. Neither the insurance company nor the client is being forced into unwanted coverage.
Yes. This has
Okay.
no effect on the ability of the carrier to choose to renew the policy or their next steps. It's simply if they're
Okay.
offering a renewal, expedite the process.
Thank you for that explanation. I apologize.
Oh, no, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know this is surplus lines is a complex area of insurance.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you
Okay,
very much for
thank
your
you.
time today.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Up next, we have Nicole Jusham, who's morning.
Morning.
Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning. Representative Wood, Senator Cabrera, Ranking Member Wong, and the committee members. Thank you for having me here today. I'm here today on behalf of the National Canine Research Council Action Fund. We're a nonprofit advocating for the Human Canine Bond, and I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 6635, the act concerning dog breeds and underwriting. There is no evidence available, either in scientific literature or in the insurance industry, that shows that using presumed breed to predict risk of liability loss is actuarially justified. Neither presumed breed nor appearance are reliable predictors of a dog's behavior. The science of genetics supports this view. Based upon a study of thousands of dogs of different breeds, canine geneticists at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard recently reported that breed is not a reliable predictor of an individual dog's behavior, and that agonistic threshold, the behavior commonly labeled aggression, the differentiated between breeds to such a small extent that it was wholly uninformative in predicting the behavior of an individual dog. Another problem with targeting groups of dogs is identifying the animals that are presumed to be subject to these restrictions. Studies and surveys conducted in universities on both coasts have shown that with respect to mixed breed dogs, which make up more than 50% of the US population, breed guesses made by those in animal-related occupations did not usually match the breed identification in the dog's DNA. The level of accuracy was shown to be 30% or less. The only remotely reliable predictor of an individual dog's future behavior is its history. If an insurance company's objective is to mitigate risk, then a dog's previous history, as well as its humane care, custody, and control should be considered, not breed. National organizations share these views. The National Animal Control Association, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Veterinary Medical Association, among many others, do not endorse breed-specific regulations. Connecticut is already among the 22 states that preempts its towns and cities from enacting breed-specific regulations. Dog owners of Connecticut should have the same protection when obtaining liability insurance for their homes or apartments. They should not have to choose between protecting their assets or protecting their family pet. We respectfully ask that the state of Connecticut reflect the findings of the peer-reviewed science, which you can find attached to my written testimony, and adopt HB 6635. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony today. Any questions or comments? Seeing none.
So,
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sorry, Senator Anwar has his hand up
Oh.
online.
Senator, sorry, I missed you. Please proceed.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony. Would you be able to speak to the differences that you're aware of between the costs that the insurance is being charged based on the breed?
But we don't have any of that information. Is not provided by the insurance companies.
Okay, but thank you for your testimony. This is very helpful, and I agree with you that this is not evidence-based information. It's a perception-based ways that the charges are different. So thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank
Senator
you.
Long has one.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I think your statement has to there are no evidentiary fact stating the differentiation for these kind of exclusions. But in the testimony that we'll get afterwards, there's a specific guideline by the insurance entities that does give defining guidelines. How do you measure up against that? They must have criterias. Are you familiar with that guideline? And how does that stack up to your evidentiary presentation that there aren't any?
Are you referring to the breeds of dogs that they use in their restrictive lists?
Yeah, the NCOIL dog breed model that they adopt and what they use as the underwriting submissions.
We have not received any actuarial data from the insurance company showing why they are using these breed restrictions. I can speak to that. Claims have gone down since 2016. While cost has gone up, that's all based on medical costs going up in this country. But in 2016, insurers paid 18,123 claims. In 2021, that number was 17,989. Does that answer your question?
I think the question you raised that we'll be getting in asking other individuals testifying on this is, are there actuarial data backing their underwriting guidelines? And you're sharing that from your perspective, that there are no studies or underlying data points to differentiate between breed. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
And so that's point counterpoint, and I'd be very eager to see some actuarial analysis. And when we do get it as a committee, I'm more than happy to share it with you as well.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions online? Nope. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Brian Anderson, followed by Rory Whelan. Brian, well, how you doing, buddy?
Good. Good to see you, Chairman Cabrera, Chairman Wood, members of the Insurance Committee. I'm Brian Anderson. I'm a legislative director for Council for AFSCME. Our union represents many first responders, including 1,900 municipal police officers, 5,000 corrections employees, and hundreds of emergency dispatchers and parole officers. Our union strongly supports Raise Bill 1015, which would prohibit insurance companies from discriminating against first responders who seek PTSD treatment. This is a common sense and humane bill. Science shows that PTSD is real. Experience shows that PTSD is readily treatable. What is still difficult is to get first responders experiencing PTSD symptoms into treatment in the first place. This is because such workers look at themselves as protectors. They're the people who are supposed to be strong and in control under any circumstance. Sometimes the protectors need protection also. This bill does exactly that. Jim Riscotti, a nationally respected PTSD treatment expert, will likely speak to you today. Jim can attest to the fact that PTSD treatment is highly effective and that first responders who get such treatment soon go back to work. This is especially important at a time when we're having a police officer recruitment and retention problem. Please remember that the General Assembly passed a law that requires police officers to get mid-career mental health exams. If they don't, their career can be over. So at the legislature's insistence, more officers are being diagnosed with PTSD. The practice of denying officers and other first responders, including firefighters and EMS workers, life insurance because they've sought PTSD treatment is just wrong. It actually risks first responders. Such a practice adds to the stigma of seeking mental health treatment. It's ironic that those who receive treatment are not a suicide risk. It's those who don't seek treatment who are at suicide risk. Everyone should want to protect their protectors. My union really thanks you all for putting this bill up. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate your testimony today. Any questions? Representative Wood?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for being here. Are you hearing that people are losing life insurance or are having difficulty getting life insurance because of seeking treatment?
We've heard of a couple of cases, and that worries us because we fear that a trend could start. If something like this starts in an industry, it tends to spread.
And the trend basically being like, hey, we've sought treatment and this is happening. Make sure you don't disclose personal information like needing help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the last thing we need, it's so hard to get these folks to seek treatment. We thought peer support groups would do it. These are folks who I think unconsciously are wired to view themselves as strong and to seek such treatment as an admission that they're not Superman or Superwoman.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So eliminating the barriers for seeking treatment is more of what we need to be looking at.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dalnicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Brian, thank you for coming forward and testifying on this, because I've known members of my town's department, police department, that have had PTSD. They've gotten treatment, and the treatment worked wonders. And it helped them out. So assuming this bill were to become law, do you see a situation where you would have more police, firefighters, dispatchers, because quite frankly, I consider dispatchers first responders too, because they have to provide the information to somebody who's trying to save a life in the field until somebody can get there to actually, a professional can get there to actually help them. Do you see this encouraging these folks, these first responders, to go get treatment?
I absolutely do, Representative. I think every affirmative message sent by this General Assembly that it's okay to get PTSD treatment is of great benefit. Police officers die at 59 years of age, according to mortality statistics, and it's basically because of stress-related illnesses. That number is a policy failure. We need to do everything we can to push that mortality number up, and I think this bill helps do that kind of thing. Every message you can send in that direction is a good message.
And do you see it also taking away the stigma?
Very much so.
Well, I thank you for coming forward and testifying on this. And hopefully we can get some action on this, because it only makes common sense to be there for the folks that protect us day in and day out and think nothing of it to protect us. And we need to think a lot about that, about how they deal with things and how they can go home safely and pass by that 59 years.
Well
Thank
said, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions or comments from Brian?
Rep Meskers has his hand up online.
Representative Meskers, please proceed, sir.
Yeah, listen, I want to thank you for your testimony. I think it is super important that we consider this. You know, each of us in our individual life has faced some enormous and difficult and stressful situations. But those issues and moments are episodic or periodic, and they're rare, luckily for most of us. The people we expect to walk out every day. And we normally tend to think of the police, but I tend to think on the first line firemen who walk out and they don't know what they're going into. They're unarmed and they're running into fire. The stress levels we put on people in those lines of service on a daily basis needs to be recognized, acknowledged in terms of the level of coverage we provide them with, and the confidence they can to find a release. I agree. I think the most stunning piece of your commentary is about the mortality rate. We need to take care of the people who take care of us. So I thank you for your testimony.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, comments?
Senator Anwar has his hand up online.
Senator Anwar, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to also mention that I wanted to thank you for your testimony, and it's sad that we have to have a bill to be able to address this, but we should support this. Right now, there is a challenge in getting enough volunteers in various capacities, and the more bills and then more laws we make, which is going to make it easier for people to continue to protect us, the more important it's going to be. So I wanted to thank you for your testimony and just thank you for that.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments? Brian, thank you. And just echo, thank you so much for your
Senator
advocacy.
Rep. Wood.
Have a
Thanks.
good day. Up next, we have Rory Whelan, followed by Jill Rickard. Are you there, Rory?
Good morning.
Good morning. Please proceed, sir.
I am Rory Whalen. I'm the Regional Vice President of the Northeast for the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, the country's largest trade association, representing PNC Insurance. I have submitted written testimony on 2 bills. I'll speak on 2 bills as quickly as I can. The first is the dog breed bill. NAMIC supports the NCOIL dog breed model bill that was mentioned earlier. However, we are opposed to 6635 because it is not reflective of the model, despite, I believe, earlier testimony. Importantly, the NCOIL Model Act prohibits insurers from using dog breed as the sole factor in denying a renewal and increasing premium, et cetera, et cetera. So I really urge the sponsor and the committee to consider amending the bill to reflect the NCOIL model. It is important for insurers to have a variety of factors. Dog breed would just be another one, along with the size of the home, the type of construction, the use of the property, et cetera. Secondly, the climate risk reporting mandate, 1014. NAMIC agrees that climate change could well have insurance implications. And in fact, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC, adopted the Climate Risk Disclosure Survey back in 2010 that has since been administered on a mandatory and public basis by a number of states, including Connecticut. Last year, the NAIC adopted a new standard for insurance companies to report climate-related risks. In alignment with the International Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, this standard is the international benchmark for climate risk disclosure and will help insurance regulators and the public to better understand the risks in the U.S. insurance market. NAMIC believes that the protection and service of policyholders should not be compromised for political expedience, social acceptance, or popular wisdom. I further would ask, if I may, a question. Why would the insurance industry, the PNC insurance industry, be singled out in this regard for this kind of wide sweeping disclosure? Is the banks required to do that? Is there legislation akin to this for the another heavily regulated, state-regulated industry such as banking? I would also urge the committee to look further into our Connecticut's various state pension funds, teachers pension fund, et cetera. Are they, to what degree have they divested their investments in fossil fuel and other climate risks? So in short, our industry is disclosing in comportment with the NAIC disclosure, and we don't believe that we should be singled out for a greater level of scrutiny than other regulated businesses in Connecticut. And I'm happy to take questions on both bills.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Senator Wong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I don't know if you heard the exchange earlier with an advocate of 6635. And one of the questions I like to ask of the industry is, do you have actuarial data and analysis relating to specific breeds to justify the exclusionary practice? And if you do, would you be able to supply that with the committee? And if not, then how would you base your rationale on the exclusionary policy?
I don't have that at my fingertips. I could certainly pursue that. again, the way it's done right now is there are multiple factors involved in determining a premium or a decision to renew. So it would not be specific to one breed or a breed overall. I will say that I am aware of stats around the liability of dog biting for homeowners and thus their insurers. And that ranges on average from 15,000 to 50,000, depending on the state. So when these very unfortunate incidents occur, they tend to be very serious. You can imagine how a claim of that size would have an impact on someone's premium.
No doubt. I mean, dog bites can be dangerous. It's part of the risk. But my question to you is, if you have actuary data analysis that looks at specific breeds, and if you do not have it, please direct us to how you're basing your rationale. It's not a whole comprehension of dog bites. I understand that. But you're talking about exclusionary policies for specific breeds. And I'm very eager to see your actuarial analysis to justify these kind of exclusionary practices. And if you don't have it readily at hand, I then ask the second follow-up question is, then how are you basing the exclusion of specific breeds if you don't have specific actuarial analysis on breeds? I mean, dog bites is a broad base, it's a risk, understandable. But we're talking about specific breeds. Are you looking at generalization? I'm very eager to look at data as to specific breeds and the statistical relevance to the exclusion of those breeds. So anything you have on that would be very, very helpful to me, just as we would need the facts to make these decisions. Thank you.
I will follow up for sure.
Thank you. Representative Nuccio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for pointing out the NCOIL language is missing solely. We will be looking at amending the claim to make sure that's in there. And just as a follow-up from what Senator Wang was saying, I personally have asked for that data, and I believe, sir, you should be able to confirm that the #1 dog bite in the United States is by a golden retriever, which is not on the list of 13. And it's simply a numbers game because there's more golden retrievers in the country than there are anything else. I do not believe the industry has. I think at NCOIL, they even confirmed that there is no actuarial information that can pinpoint a dog bite. Yes, is very bad, but I don't think there's anything out there that can pinpoint these 13 breeds of dogs and classification of just bites by them. So respectfully, if you have that data, I would love to see it. I've asked for it at NCOIL at a national level and also here in the state of Connecticut level and have not been able to obtain it. So while I agree dog bites are bad, I don't think we should price higher for golden retrievers. Thank you, sir.
And thank you, Representative, for considering amending the bill to include solely. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments?
Rep Meskers has his hand up online.
Representative Meskers, please.
Yeah, I just want to thank the previous speaker for his testimony, but I wrestle with the issue about breeds of dogs and insurance, and I, like my former representative or my former speaker, Representative Nuccio, I haven't seen detailed data. There are two pieces to insurance when we look at insurance. One is to cover our losses, secure ourselves from risk, and at some level socialize the cost. Now that sounds like a dangerous word to some people, but I insure my house against a fire because 500 houses around me want to be insured by fire. And when one burns down, my premiums go to repair the house. So we socialize the cost in the way we look at the premiums. What we need to look at with the dog breed over time, and if there's pushback from the industry, is to what extent, as Representative Nuccio mentioned, the golden retrievers, we need to look at the number of bites, the severity of the bites, and if we want to go down to classification, They have to formulate a policy based on what they think the risks and losses are. And we have to figure out, do we make the general populace of dog owners pay the policy premium? That's what we're proposing here, because we have no statistical data. And we think what's happening is that people who want to own certain breeds are being discriminated against. So I like the idea that we're going to revisit the language on solely. I encourage the industry to develop policies that they think there is accurate data to reflect their concern about certain breeds. And they need to provide us with some of that data so we can legislate differently. But absent that, I'm inclined to support the NCOIL model legislation along with the potentially proposed solely insert. So I thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Whelan. We appreciate your testimony today. Up next is Joe Rickard, followed by James Riscotti. Joe, are you there?
Hello. I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair Wood, Chair Cabrera, Vice Chairs Barry and Anwar, ranking members and members of the committee. My name is Jill Rickard, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the American Council of Life Insurers in relation to Senate Bill 1015, an act prohibiting life insurance companies from discriminating against first responders diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. ACLI is a national trade organization that has 280 member companies who represent approximately 94% of industry assets in the United States. We have submitted a joint statement together with the Insurance Association of Connecticut on the bill, but I did want to provide you with some brief comments on the nature of life insurance and why it's important for life insurers to have access to all relevant health information at the time of an application for coverage. Life insurers, let me first start by saying, are very supportive of all of those committed to the public safety and health of our communities. Life insurance companies want to help first responders, like all Americans, address their financial protection needs. But we do oppose this bill because we advocate for the ability of our industry to continue to holistically underwrite and evaluate risk based on all relevant health information. As you know, unlike many other forms of insurance, life insurers have one opportunity to assess risk and to set a premium for a policy that could be in place for decades. Once a policy is issued, coverage cannot be dropped and individual premium cannot be increased over the life of the policy. Because they get just one chance, it is particularly important for life insurers to get the evaluation right at the beginning. To get it right and appropriately underwrite and price a policy for the long term, they need access to all medically relevant information when evaluating the application. This includes physical characteristics, mental and physical health history, sometimes blood work and other medical evaluations, family history, etc. They also weigh many factors when assessing the risk associated with a particular mental or physical health condition. This could include the severity and history of the condition, any improvement or stability of the condition over time, whether an individual receives treatment or care, and what treatments have been or are being undertaken, including medication, mental health treatment, etc. Like physical health conditions, there are many mental health conditions, including PTSD, unfortunately, that may impact a person's life expectancy for a variety of reasons. Fortunately, as has been mentioned, there are many aspects of a person's health and well-being, including treatment, that are also taken into account in a holistic evaluation when a person applies for coverage. ACLI and IAC life insurer members are committed to supporting a robust and competitive market that offers products that are affordable and meet a variety of consumers' needs. To ensure this type of competitive market exists, companies must be able to accurately assess risk. This includes differentiating based on sound actuarial principles and reasonably anticipated experience based on clinical and industry-based research.
Jill, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your 3 minutes of eclipse, please summarize.
Thank you. If an insurer can't access this relevant information, the danger is that they may not appropriately be able to price the pool for the risks that come up Each company has a different risk tolerance, and we encourage individuals to engage with multiple companies to find a policy that best suits their needs. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jill. I don't know if you've been on the whole time listening to testimony, but I was wondering if you heard Brian's story and can comment on, you had just said that you take into account people that have also addressed their mental health illnesses and have done the appropriate steps to either steady, the situation or overcome it. In his case, it sounds like he not only overcame his mental health condition, but also is working to help others. I was wondering if you can comment on, whether you thought he should have been denied life insurance.
Thank you, Representative Wood. I can't comment specifically on this individual application as I don't know all of the factors that have gone into it. And I also don't know what companies he applied with, because each company has different underwriting criteria and tolerance for risk. I do know that companies are competitive with each other, and if they want to write a policy, if they can write a policy, if that is something that falls within their risk tolerance, they absolutely will write that policy. And there are a number of different types of policies available, anywhere from group coverage offered by your employer or a municipality, guaranteed issue coverage. Both of those have limited to no medical underwriting, so those are available to all individuals. If they don't, if they aren't able to get an individual underwritten policy, they do cost slightly more. But there are also companies that specifically write first responder coverage. So there are a number of options available, and without knowing the specifics of the individual case, I apologize that I can't speak to the individual coverage needs or reasons for denial.
And do you know, amongst your members, are there cases where denials have been in place but then were reversed?
I'm not aware of individual policies. I do know it has been mentioned that if one life insurer denies coverage, it sort of spreads like wildfire, and then other companies deny. That is not the case. Each company will individually evaluate an applicant and use sound actuarial principles. And I don't think denial by another company would necessarily be sound actuarially. So it is an individual evaluation in each case.
Great, thank you. Representative Delnicki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you're issuing insurance to a first responder, police officer, firefighter, even a dispatcher, does that trigger specific questions to be asked of the individual based on their employment and their job?
It may. There tends to be a standardized health questionnaire that each applicant is given, and there may be follow-up questions based on some of the answers. But that, again, is in individual companies have different application processes.
So when you ask specific questions, if the individual obviously has gone through treatment, has their PTSD under control, at that point, with that answer, would you then have good confidence in writing an insurance policy for the individual?
Thank you for that question. I'm not an insurance underwriter, but I can say that it is very much a holistic evaluation of each individual. So treatment does absolutely play into the evaluation of the risk. Untreated conditions, of course, are much more likely to lead to mortality, morbidity risk. Treated conditions, like you say, are taken into account tend to speak to a longer life experience because a condition is under treatment. And an insurer will take that into account.
Yeah, I just have to make an observation. I find it very troubling that a first responder who puts their life on the line to protect our lives then has to go through a battery of questions that may or may not be intrusive, just so as to be able to have an insurance policy to protect themselves and their family. Thank you for coming forward with your testimony, because quite frankly, you've opened my eyes to a bit to some of the process that goes on here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jill, for being here. Mike, can you please explain the pricing structure, and is that based on risk, and what would constitute high risk?
So again, each insurer, thank you for your question, has a different risk tolerance and a different methodology for pricing their policies. I would be happy to provide you access with someone from our actuarial team or an underwriter, a medical underwriter, to help answer some of those specific questions. But in short, people with like risks by law must be priced the same. So they're assigned to a risk pool. And then premiums for the pool are sort of determined based on the risk of the pool, and they need to be adequate over the presumed life of a policy in order to support the solvency of the plan, the stability of the market. We can't increase premiums on an individual, so we need to be able to price appropriately based on all available information at the beginning when the policy is underwritten. Because if not, there are solvency concerns. The premiums may be increased across the board for everyone, which would then decrease the number of people who are able to afford or who choose to purchase coverage.
Thank you. And are there any conditions that would prompt a denial?
So there are typically policies are not written based on one single factor, but in a number of cases, there may be one factor that prohibits the issuance of a policy, such as a terminal illness diagnosis, for example, but there are a few.
Thank you. All set, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Next up is James Rascati, followed by Brian Zolkowski.
James is online, but he's muted and his camera's off.
James, are you there?
I'm sorry. I'm here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Maybe I should hit the start video. My apologies.
Okay, perfect.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Wood, Chairman Cabrera, members of the Insurance Committee. My name is James Rascati, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I wholeheartedly support Bill 1015. PTSD, along with many psychiatric disorders, can be well treated with proper psychological and, in some cases, psychopharmacological approaches. Both the clinical research and my own experience over the past 21 years working with and treating first responders shows that PTSD treatment can be extremely effective. Various studies looking at antidepressants, mood stabilizers, antipsychotic, and other medications demonstrate a remission rate of 30 to 40%. Police, firefighters, the military, and other first responders, once diagnosed and treated for PTSD, often, in my experience, return to work. For example, EMDR is a specific brain-focused treatment that has shown phenomenal success with veterans and other first responders. Over the last 21 plus years, I've worked with dozens, if not hundreds, of police and firefighters, many of which were diagnosed with PTSD. By far, the majority of them who received appropriate and culturally competent behavioral health care were able to return to full duty. I've been in the behavioral health field for 5 decades. I've also maintained an appointment as a clinical instructor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine for the last 37 years. What I can tell you without equivocation is that there are better behavioral health treatments today than ever before. For the most part, we know that treatment works. One of the biggest obstacles that first responders have in seeking care is worry about stigma and the false notion that their livelihood will be negatively impacted if they receive behavioral health care. But we know that when the men and women who protect and serve our communities receive culturally competent and trauma-informed care, they do get better, and again, in the majority of times, return to work. We should all want to support a bill that prohibits discrimination against those first responders who receive treatment for their PTSD. I will end my testimony with the following anecdote. 1 week after the tragic events at Sandy Hook Elementary School, my firm and I were asked to meet with members of the Newtown Police Department. Within a few weeks, my colleagues and I began working with Newtown Police Department and continue to work with them to this day. What I can tell you from my work there over the past 10 years at Newtown, all of those Newtown officers who were diagnosed with PTSD all returned to work except one. This is clearly a testament to the treatment provided to them, not just by my company, but the other culturally competent and trauma-informed therapists who serve them. So again, I wholeheartedly support Bill 1015. I'd be more than willing to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, James. Any questions? Representative Delnicki.
I can defer to the ranking member. No. So listening to your testimony and the treatments, if an officer, police officer, firefighter, corrections officer, member of the military, if they go through that treatment, there should be no discrimination whatsoever against them when it comes to insurance. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. I mean, if they're receiving appropriate treatment, culturally competent, trauma-informed, and they're no longer symptomatic, to me, it is discriminatory not to allow them to apply for life insurance. They risk their lives daily for us. And as I said, and as the research shows in my own experience, PTSD can be successfully treated. I would be concerned, people who are not in treatment, obviously who are symptomatic, but when I'm telling you dozens, if not hundreds of first responders in my experience who were diagnosed with PTSD have returned to work and continue to work to this day.
Well, I want to thank you for your testimony, and I couldn't have said it any better than the way you have expressed it and how these folks should be treated. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for the great work that you've done in support of law enforcement, particularly in Newtown. I'm appreciative, and I know the community is. And I also want to extend my personal gratitude for your participation for the past 3 years during COVID and the mental health challenges that we have all experienced, particularly our young people. I've done a number of programs with you, and you've been a tremendous asset. So I want to thank you on that. I want to publicly acknowledge thanking you. But I'm looking at this, and we all know it's important. But do you equate this to kind of the continuation of the stigma of mental health? You know, I think what you heard earlier was a rejection of any application, not a higher rate or higher risk assessment. We have heard that it is a complete rejection. We wouldn't reject people if they have high blood pressure or if they have broken bones in the past. But what I'm hearing based upon the accounts that's been shared is somebody struggling through PTSD and seeking help would be rejected. And that to me just kind of runs foul of all of our efforts to remove the social stigma of seeking mental health support. And one of the biggest lessons you've taught when we've done a lot of our programs is the societal impact of social stigma gets reinforced not only from a direct basis, but indirect basis of how we do business and how we treat this differently and allow it to exist. Could you elaborate if that makes sense, or is it just patently wrong?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there's a huge difference. The issue of stigma, well, so I'm old. I've been in the mental health field for 5 decades. Stigma is much better today than it was when I began my career 50 years ago. There's no question about that. Having said that, however, we do not treat brain diseases the same way we do other physical medical conditions. That stigma still exists. I think in many ways it's become systemic. And this is an example of that. I think we don't know and appreciate the tremendous strides in treatment that have occurred over the last 30, 40 years. So I think you're absolutely correct. I think some of it is institutional lack of understanding about mental illness can be well treated. Now, obviously, the issue of mental illness is it takes sometimes different treatment approaches, and what may work for one officer may not work for another officer. But the reality is that these men and women who have been diagnosed with PTSD with the proper treatment are functioning today in our communities as police, firefighters, and EMTs. This bill clearly just makes no, this bill is an important bill because we should not allow this institutional misunderstanding and discrimination to continue. I think you're absolutely spot on your assessment of this situation.
And in your work with law enforcement, not naming any specifics, I'm sure, and if you could validate, we've always heard the fact that the bravado and the kind of self-reliance and resiliency, but also the underlying fear for many of our law enforcement. I've heard from instructors at post that if they go seek the help that they need for trauma or mental health or PTSD, that their rights as a gun carrier or an ability to do other career aspects, security, would be undermined if not eliminated. What do you say to that? Is that true? Is that a true cultural kind of a phenomenon within police forces among men and women that if they seek mental health, this type of stigma and application would impact their future livelihood and their ability to be respected and participating citizens?
It is the biggest obstacle we face is getting, whether it's police or fire or EMTs, doesn't matter, to get them to understand using mental health services, whether it's for drinking, for depression, for PTSD, for acute stress, is not going to impact them on their career. What's going to impact that firefighter or first responder is not addressing their demons, whatever those demons may be. Philandering, gambling, drinking, drugging, that's going to impact. But the largest obstacle we have is just what you said, the incorrect thought that by seeking mental health care, it is going to negatively impact my career. That is not factual at all. In fact, as many of you on this committee know, being an insurance committee, is that these are confidential services. And that's why 20 years ago, we began creating police and fire peer support teams, recognizing the reticence first responders have in talking to people like me. They got to talk to someone. The work that they do, and I don't care if it's a small community or Bridgeport or New Haven or Newtown, they see things daily that we watch on TV. So the biggest challenge, it's getting better, is to educating our first responder community that A, treatment works, that B, seeking treatment is not going to jam you up, and that more people should, if they need care, should seek appropriate, culturally competent and trauma-informed care.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your great work continuously, and I'm grateful. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Any hands up? Great, Jim, thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Next up is Brian Zakowski, followed by Eric George.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate your time. My name is Brian Zakowski, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of Senate Bill 1015. This bill has an importance to me because the intent of this bill has affected me personally and I am sure it has affected other first responders. The facts of these denials have lived in the dark, as has mental health awareness. If I had not brought this issue forward to Senator Summers and had her advocate for this, would you know that these denials had been in existence? I was a police officer here in Connecticut for more than 20 years. During that time, I was exposed to many traumatic, unforeseen circumstances and life-altering experiences, all aspects that I understood was part of the job that I chose. I was fortunate to be named Police Officer of the Year in both 2008 and 2015. Unfortunately, a medical injury caused my retirement from my position as a police officer. I was very passionate about this position, and it ended before I was ready to separate. This sudden separation began a journey of reoccurring traumatic events, nightmares, and feeling depressed that they would never end. A journey that took me to a breaking point on May 3rd of 2018, where I contemplated suicide to end the reoccurring events, nightmares, and the depression. It was only through the support of my family, my therapist at the time, and the thoughts of leaving my children that prevented this action. I voluntarily agreed to be hospitalized and undergo treatment for what was diagnosed as severe PTSD. Upon my release from treatment, I was issued a document from the treating physician that said that I was able to return to work and had no restrictions on anything regarding my treatment. I was going through a divorce process that required a court order establishment of life insurance for a policy of just $150,000 to protect my children and provide them a benefit in my absence. Prior to this, I had a $1 million life insurance policy that had lapsed due to the final impact of losing my job, the time away. And so I had a policy in place that had lapsed. My efforts to do the right thing, follow a court order, and provide protection for my children in the form of life insurance was denied. Denied because I did the right thing and asked for help when my mental health was suffering. It was suffering due to the PTSD that I was diagnosed with and treated for from my time as a first responder. I can speak of and confirm these denials with the support of documentation and email correspondence that affirm these denials. Denials that say they are solely based on depression history. What I can't speak of and what has brought me here today is to speak for those that have not asked for help with their mental health for fear of denial of benefits. We do not know these individuals or even have what number of first responders this is because they live in silence. Silence created out of conversations from their colleagues that have also been denied. These denials feel as if we are being punished for doing what society encourages us to do, ask for help. I learned a lesson that the insurance company network is very strong. And when we heard testimony a few moments ago that says that there is not a cascading effect, I can provide you information that counters that information. I can also tell you that the first responder community is a very strong network, and the cascading effect in that network is also very strong. I'm asking for help to support this bill and prevent a system that punishes those of us who ask for help. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions in regards to this.
Brian, thank you for coming here today. I mean, obviously this bill is here and in front of us because of your testimony and, your work. And I'm glad you got help, and I'm glad we're able to share a story. And thank you for being a police officer. I'm sorry that your career ended early too.
Thank you.
I was wondering, how many companies did you apply to? Do you know the list, or is it because we just heard testimony saying that there are insurance companies that specialize for first responders, and there's municipal coverage. We've just heard someone counter basically what you're saying. And I was wondering if you could just give your story on that.
I can, and I appreciate that opportunity. What started as, applying for what was known insurance companies to me cascaded into filling out simple forms online on my phone. And then, would you like to speak to an agent? Everything from Ladder to Ethos to, Big Lou Insurance, term provider, companies you hear advertised on the radio, to major corporations. I really don't want to put them on, the spot here, but major corporations that we all know that live in, that live in this state, providing to them, working with an insurance broker to ask them to help fill out applications and find companies that would. 12 of them with one insurance broker that I have the email correspondence that said the first 6 would not even, take your application. The other 6 were waiting on, and then a week later got the information back that said they also would not do so. The process started because you get to a certain point of the process of the questionnaire that asks you, have you ever been hospitalized or treated for mental health within the last 5 years? My answer was yes, being honest. Oh, well, then did you have suicidal ideologies? Yes. Oh, well, that discludes you from getting any further in the process. Now, fast forward to I'm working with other insurance companies. Have you ever been denied in writing or by another insurance company? Yes. Oh, then we can't even take your application if you've been denied, because of the fact that other insurance companies will see that denial and they'll just act upon that same thing. So the barriers that were in place prevented me from even providing the documentation from my physician that said that I was treated properly and had no restrictions and able to return to work and do it. I was never even able to give them that documentation because the questionnaire precludes you from going further. And then once you have a denial, other insurance companies tell you, oh, you can't because you've been denied because you were certain medication for PTSD. Or, there's a thing that's called your Medical Information Bureau, the MIB. They ask you, well, you write to your MIB and find out what the information is on that, because that's what they used for your denial. I've written to my MIBs and have gotten documentation in my folder that says there's no record of you and your date of birth within our files. So where was the denial? It was based off of the information I provided during my application, mental health, PTSD, and medications that were used to treat that. As I said, I had $1 million policy prior to it lapsing, and then now I'm seeking $150,000, and the only medical condition that changed for me was my mental health, and that was what was the basis of the denials.
We also heard from a previous speaker that, each assessment is unique based on its risk, and this cascading effect that you're talking about shouldn't exist. But I feel like in your case, based on filling out these forms, that it does exist, because you can't get any farther once you check this box that you've been denied by other life insurance companies. How far away are you from the hospitalization? Has it been 5 years, 3 years?
So here's a wonderful fact to add into this.
Yep.
My PTSD diagnosis was 2018. So I would be eligible, if you want to say, to reapply in 2023, June of 2023. In that time frame, I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer and had prostate surgery. So now life insurance companies deny me on that fact of getting life insurance on the fact that I have a medical condition. But if I had life insurance in place at the time, it would be a pre-existing, it would be a condition that was pre-existing and the policy would be in place. So now it's a double penalty for it not being there prior. So the 5-year window is a long window for people to not have any other type of medical condition come up.
Have you shared your story with other people in the law enforcement network, and have they shared similar stories? Or hearing about this happening with any of your former colleagues?
I have not. I have shared my story with other members of my immediate network. But as you've heard other people testify here and share, and I'm sure that you've heard this a lot. The mental health issue with law enforcement, first responders, police, fire, EMS, and everything like that is getting a lot of traction, and it's getting a lot of awareness, and people are speaking about it more often as not. But when you're in a network of people that are like-minded and are, that is your camaraderie, is that when you speak about that, you personalize a weakness that takes you out of that community. Maybe not literally, but in your mind, you do. You're kind of taking yourself, because you're not, still that person that's going for it. Add in the separation of the job, so people who lose their position because of their mental health and then now have another factor going on. So it really took a lot for me to reach out to Senator Summers and, bring this issue forward to her. I know she's done a lot of other work with mental health, and that's what started me on that pathway. And, I'm not afraid to share my story, and I'm not afraid to share my documentation at this point. And, I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to get the support on this so that, other people who are sitting there who are afraid to share their story are not going to be, because they know they'll have it.
Thank you. Any other
you.
questions? Senator Wong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your courage to share your story, because it couldn't have been easy. But it seemed to me that you had kind of reached a point where you had nothing to lose. But nevertheless, I wanted to commend you on your courage in sharing the stories. We talked a lot about the logistics and the struggle and the challenge of the industry dynamics that you talked about. I want to delve a little bit. The speaker before you, Mr. Rascotti, and I'm sure what you went through as a result of seeking mental health support as a law enforcement officer, and what the ensuing impact on you and your ability to be able to be accepted and to be able to get the necessary services has now been restricted or stigmatized. Do you not see that among your colleagues in the law enforcement corps has a chilling effect for them to say, hey, if this is happening to Brian, I'm not putting myself at risk. I got too much at risk here for the rest of my life. I'm willing to just, you know what, I'll tough it out and run the risk of not seeking mental health support.
I couldn't agree with you more that it is. And it's something where we're asking first responders with the police accountability bill and others to share all of their information. How are you? How are you doing? If you know that sharing everything is going to have a punitive effect, you're really not going to share everything. You're going to share a portion that will get you a check on the box that you came and had a conversation with somebody. But knowing that you're now going to expose yourself to something that may be a denial. And we heard it from the previous testimony that it is used as a factor in denials based on, and even if it is an individual basis and a singular assessment of the information. But if it happens to one person, the next person is not going to use that same information. They're going to be guarded on that and not say what they're going to do if they know that this has happened to one person. And so I think that you're correct. There is going to be, a guarding of information.
And that is part of the conversation here is that I said earlier is we need to remove the stigma of mental health. And just kind of listening to your testimony and what a incredible and compelling story, but you had a difficult number of couple of years. The change in vocation and life changes and all that. You're a better place because you went and sought mental health support. And I think that sometimes gets lost in this conversation, right? Is that your honesty with yourself, your honesty with your mental health state and seeking support is what we always talk about and encourage. But when the residual effect is the negative impact of being honest and taking care of yourself, and despite the challenges that you have endured, and you've cited a number of them, God bless you, you are still healthy and know where your limits and supportive services and continue to seek that support. My biggest fear is our continual structural stigmatization of mental health forces people to not seek the help that they need. Can you just share that the difficult times you had and how important it is for you to keep an even keel and to be honest with the emotional roller coaster that we all experience?
Sure. The process of just speaking about the reason why I'm here on the life insurance applications, like I shared with Senator Summers when I met with her about this, I was desperate to put the life insurance policy in place to meet my divorce decree requirements. So much so that I was in the parking lot of Stop and Shop in Waterford on my phone, applying online to companies that I was just finding doing a Google search, and then hitting that barrier of the questionnaire of have you had hospitalization or treatment for mental health issues, and then going to, speaking to your person and being denied on that, and then having that conversation with an agent on the phone of saying, well, I have documentation that says I have no restrictions, and they're like, yeah, well, that's no, it's a done deal. When I say the desperation of hanging up that phone and sitting in the parking lot and thinking like, well, did I do the right thing by going and getting help? Like, I probably wouldn't be here today. Like, I probably wouldn't be in the parking lot of Stop and Shop making these phone calls and doing these Google searches if I had not sought the help. So my question is like, did I do the right thing? Should I have been harnessed in what I shared? Should I lie to the insurance companies? Should I tell them no and then let them, and then roll the dice that they find out or they don't find out so I can meet the requirements of this? I mean, the question is like, it just makes more mental stress for you than the situation that you just got relief from. So I don't know how else to put that.
No, I appreciate your time and thank you for your courage in sharing your story. I think I truly believe that you're speaking for many others who are still very much in the shadows, and that's unfortunate. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Delnicki.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Brian, for coming forward and testifying about what happened to you and the level of discrimination that you saw after having done the right thing, gotten treatment, got your PTSD under control, and quite frankly, after hearing about the difficulty you had, and you had to go to court. Is that correct? You had to go to court to get insurance?
No, it was part of my divorce decree that I
Okay.
had to provide a life insurance policy, with my ex as being the beneficiary for protection of the children. We have 3 children.
So that's what got you into the jackpot of being honest about your medical treatment, the fact that you had been treated for and had recovered from PTSD.
Correct.
That's if there ever was a compelling story as to why people wouldn't want to seek it, hearing what you went through by doing the right thing, by being honest, by being straightforward, getting the treatment and recovering, and then to be penalized for it. Is that fairly correct in what I've heard here?
100%.
It really begs the issue about what kind of discrimination is occurring here, because you're a first responder, and I know a number of first responders that went through treatment, and I'm struck with the fact that if they were honest and straightforward about having received the treatment and having recovered, they could run into the same issue that you ran into. Is that correct?
That's my belief, and my belief stems from my experience.
Well, you certainly put a face on the issue, and you certainly have raised some red flags here. And all I can say is thank you for your service. Thank you for coming here today, putting a face to the issue, because many a time we'll have a bill before us and we hear testimony from advocates. But when you hear it from someone who's actually been a victim of what occurred here, it resonates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric George, followed by Diana Bray.
It is a bright light, isn't it? Representative Wood, Senator Cabrera, members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee. My name is Eric George. I'm the president of the Insurance Association of Connecticut. I'm here to actually offer testimony on 3 bills. Senate Bill 1015, Senate Bill 1014, and 6635. That was extraordinarily compelling testimony that you just heard. And I am extremely sympathetic and sensitive. And I'm actually hoping that Brian stays around afterwards. I have been speaking with Senator Summers about this issue. And there are some points, Jill Rickard from ACLI, I thought laid it out very nicely, but I just want to emphasize a few points. Life insurance is different than every other type of insurance out there. There's only one opportunity to assess the risk. It's not renewed annually. It's not renewed any other periodically. So the amount of information to be able to accurately determine what the risk is so premium can be set appropriately is extremely important. We're required legally to assess the risk and treat similarly situated people, similarly situated risks the same. It has been, I have asked my members this question once this bill came up. Would the designation diagnosis of PTSD solely be the basis for a denial? And every company that is a member of the IAC that writes life insurance said no. It is a holistic view. And that's why I want to talk to Brian, because I think we need to know more. I need to know more about his case. I've seen some of the documentation, but clearly not all of it. He is entitled, as every individual who has life insurance to decline, he is entitled to the reason why, the precise reason why, as everyone is. So I want to talk to him more about that. But just like a diagnosis of cancer, or whether you smoke, or whether you're a heavy drinker, or whether you're obese, or as Senator Huang mentioned before, is a determination made because of high blood pressure? Absolutely. All of these are factors that have an impact as to what your life expectancy is going to be. I'm somebody who's sitting before you who has high blood pressure, and it's managed. Because it's managed, it is mitigated in the eyes of the life insurers. If an individual has PTSD and has sought treatment, that mitigates the issue completely. If someone has suicidal ideations, not all suicidal ideations are treated the same. If somebody contemplated suicide yesterday, that's not the same as contemplating it when you were 23 years old, and as a young man or a young woman, you have all the pressures of the world on you. Or if you were going through a divorce or a bankruptcy and there were all of these external factors, and if you sought treatment for that, those are all mitigating factors in the risk assessment. So I'm happy to answer questions on Senate Bill 1015. I also just want to briefly mention Senate Bill 1014, which is the climate change bill. Please be aware of the existing disclosures that insurance companies make in terms of fossil fuels and climate risk, climate change efforts. We are Connecticut is part of the NEIC climate change survey. We all participate in that, as well as the TCFD, which has been incorporated into the survey. And we also are significantly regulated by the Department of Insurance, most recently by a recent bulletin in terms of our climate related activities. I don't believe Senate Bill 1014 is really looking at the situation with everything in mind. And then finally,
Eric, I'm sorry, your 3 minutes are up. Please
thank
summarize.
you. Then finally, on House Bill 6635, which is the dog breed and homeowners insurance bill, I want to say this clearly, we do not oppose it. Currently, because of a drafting error, I don't believe it was intentional in my conversations with folks, it doesn't reflect the NCOIL model. It easily can, and in my testimony, I show how it can be done. It's the inclusion of the word solely in a very precise spot. If that is done, it is in compliance and it is in conformity with NCOIL. But I want to be clear that we do not oppose House Bill 6635. I'll stop there and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Eric. And I was at the NCOIL meeting when you and your members were participating in that process with Representative Nuccio. So thank you for your participation and help in making that model language. Any questions from the committee? Representative Delnicki.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Eric, for coming forward. When a first responder applies for life insurance, does that trigger any specific questions?
So there's a questionnaire that's given to all applicants. And by the way, each company's questionnaire is different. So those are their first assessment of the individual in terms of what the risk profile is. So when you say first responder, what I think you're asking is, does somebody's job classification or job designation, is that a consideration? And the answer is yes. One of many considerations. Not every job classification brings with it the same impacts on somebody's life expectancy as another. There are different, as we all can understand, there are certain risks inherent in certain jobs that are present in some and not present in others. So to answer your question, there is a questionnaire. Absolutely. Each company develops its own, and your job classification is important.
So, and I'll use myself as an example, treatment for cholesterol and high blood pressure. And quite frankly, I think my pressure is a little bit high here today. But the point being, there was no, for lack of a better term, discrimination against me when I applied for insurance and I told them I was taking blood pressure medicine and cholesterol medicine. And I'm just trying to square it because I'm struck by the fact that there's a level of discrimination against a first responder that applies for life insurance, is being treated or has been treated and is cured of the PTSD. And the story we heard here just a few moments ago, how do you square all that?
I would respectfully disagree with your premise. What I heard you say is that your disclosure of high blood pressure and cholesterol didn't act as a discriminatory factor in your pursuit of life insurance.
Correct.
It was considered. Without knowing the companies that you applied for, I would tell you almost to 100% certainty, it was considered. And also to almost 100% certainty, the fact that you were taking medication to address both of those conditions, that was considered. And a diagnosis of PTSD would be considered. And treatment, which I believe does need to be destigmatized 100%, would be considered as well. So again, respectfully, I think as the person is viewed as a whole, you, Brian, me, anybody, it is your entire medical makeup. It is your entire, what do you do in your life as a job? What actions, behavioral actions have you decided that are you a smoker? Do you participate in illegal drugs? I mean, these are all questions and considerations which have an impact on your life expectancy. And that is what life insurers are trying to best determine, because insurance only works if enough premium was taken in so that there is adequate capital to pay out the claims that are going to come. In life insurance, we're talking about the factor is you're no longer alive, and there is a pool of money that is going to go to your designated beneficiaries. To get to that accuracy, you need as much information as possible. If you price your product too high, since it's an extremely competitive market, people will not buy it. If you price it too low, you'll have a bunch of people buying it, and you'll run out of capital, and you'll have an instance where the consumer or the insurer could actually go under. And that's why we have guarantee funds, because that actually does happen sometimes when mistakes are made. But long-winded answer to your very direct question. I would say with nearly 100% accuracy that your medical conditions and your treatment of them were considered when you applied for life insurance.
So in my case, I was able to get insurance at life insurance at a reasonable price. But wouldn't the same situation with a first responder that is under treatment, has had treatment, and basically is cured, Because I'm never cured of having the high blood pressure per se.
Nor am I, nor am
I'm
I.
never cured of having the cholesterol issue per se. But that individual has been cured, and we heard from a clinician who basically went over and explained the entire situation, how a first responder can be treated for PTSD, I should say, and gets past that point and has recovered, yet that still becomes a stigma on the ability to get insurance, life insurance.
I would agree with what you said with the period ending at stigma, and that's an unfortunate reality, which I think we all need to work to dispel. It is a stigma on first responders, and I think it's terrible, and we need to do everything we can to combat that. I don't know exactly what it would mean to say a stigma on life insurance. What I think I'm hearing is that it would preclude you from getting life insurance. And as I said initially, everything that I have learned from my members and what I've studied and read is that it is a consideration, but it is not the sole factor. And that's very much why I want to talk to Brian about his specific case so I can learn more. I only know a little bit. I heard him today and I thought he testified beautifully, and really it's a compelling argument. But I want to know more about his case. I don't mean to speak for you, Representative Delnicki. I just want to make sure that when I answer your question, that I'm hearing it and answering it appropriately.
I know we've had many times of having difficult question and answer periods with.
I've always enjoyed them.
With various insurance issues. I'm struck with the fact we need to do something here. Because, you know, we've gotten past the hurdle of no police officer, firefighter, first responder, if they seek treatment, should ever be in a situation of losing their job. Because they recognize it, they get the treatment, and they're 100% again, and they're out in the field doing their job, saving lives, maintaining law and order, helping people. And I'm struck with the fact that based on what I've heard here today, this morning, just how problematic it is for these folks to get insurance, life insurance. And I am struck by the fact that something has to be done. And I appreciate you coming forward, because you're in a difficult spot after hearing that testimony, coming forward to give your testimony. So again, thank you for coming forward. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask.
As always, Representative Delnicki, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Joe.
One
Sorry,
of the things,
Representative Barry.
we're good. One of the things I found fascinating was that you assess the premium and the risk at one point and you never reevaluate it again. So can you just kind of go in, I kind of asked Jill earlier, but just into the pricing structure. I know that it's based on risk, but is it also based on age and other things? Okay.
Oh, sure. So let me start off the conversation, just like if I was talking to you and giving you legal advice and I'm not your lawyer, say, I'm not your lawyer. Every insurance company does it differently. It's proprietary in terms of how they assess risk. Now, they do have to get it approved, their process, by the Department of Insurance. It has to be actuarially sound. But the factors that go in, typical, your age, your weight. Sadly, nobody likes to hear that, but your weight. Are you obese? What is your blood pressure? Do you have any other conditions? You have high cholesterol. Are you smoke? What behavioral activities do you engage in that might impact your life expectancy? Smoking is the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit. All of that is considered. And the individual company will weight those items differently. Now, we've all heard this, that there are life insurance companies that don't ask any medical questions. They'll write you a policy without asking you anything on your medical questions. So to answer your question, it's a variety of factors. And yes, age is definitely one of them.
And my second question, I'm not sure if you would know this, but is it common for like cities and towns to offer life insurance to their police officers?
That's a good question. So offhand, I'd have to research it for you. But I'm struck with thinking about, sorry to talk about a sister trade association, but CCM right now. And within CCM, or maybe right on the side, is KERMA. And they provide a lot of insurance to municipalities. We could do some research talking to KERMA to see if life insurance, and I would actually think that there's a high likelihood, Representative Barry, that it is. Like, you know, in municipalities, just like every employer out there, want to attract talent. And life insurance is a very attractive benefit that people consider when they're deciding if they're going to work. So I would think that the likelihood is high, but I'd have to research it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Representative Meskers has a question online.
Representative Meskers,
I
you're
look
on.
right here, right? Or do I turn around?
Thank you very much. Eric, you had some of my support till you went to the issue of age and weight, and then you began to lose me. So I'll hold that against you personally. In relation to life insurance, and I want to throw out the thought of the question or the comment. I don't know why we would discriminate against people with PTSD in terms of life insurance. It would seem to me, if we're trying to treat the totality of the individual and he's seeking help, if the major concern potentially is suicide, then the issue becomes an exclusion for one cause for life insurance for a 1, 2, 3 year period. You know, when I buy hurricane or flood insurance, it's very interesting. My policy had lapsed. I went to renew my policy a couple of years, like going back 10 or 15 years ago. And when I went to sign up for the insurance policy, there was a 30-day exclusion. And of course, I realized it was needed to be renewed, and there was a storm approaching. And I knew that for 30 days I was exposed. So I think there's two issues. One, penalizing people who seek counseling and seek help, and excluding certain risks. But when I look at the last case where a person was denied coverage and subsequently contracted prostate cancer, which I don't think we're going to ascribe to PTSD. I think we need to explore all the alternatives to provide people with adequate coverage. And I think a blanket exclusion on PTSD is not wise or acceptable. It goes against the public interest. It goes against our support for our first responders. And I would like the industry to think heavily on what they're doing there.
Representative Meskers, I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't believe that is occurring. I do not believe there is a blanket exclusion for PTSD. Everything that I have heard does not state that. And that's why I want to talk to Brian. So the individual who's this bill is based upon. His issue, I believe, absolutely needs to be addressed.
Okay.
I agree.
I'll refer it through to the chair, who I respect, who's done a great job, or the co-chairs. And I think that's the question at hand. Are people being denied? And can we work out whatever reasonable exclusion? Because people shouldn't be blocked out of life insurance for 5 years. I think it's unacceptable.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Diana Bray, followed by Alyssa Miller-Hurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. Also, thank you to Sean. This is my first time appearing, and Sean has been wonderful, so thank you. My name is Dana Bray. I live in Oxford, Connecticut, and I'm here today to speak in favor of House Bill number 6635 on the use of dog breeds in insurance. For context and for your information, I'm a clinical lecturer in law at Yale Law School's Law, Ethics, and Animals program, and a leader in the American Bar Association Animal Law Committees. I offer this testimony in my personal capacity and not on behalf of my employer or any other organization. From the perspective of a lawyer who has focused my professional life on animal law and policy for more than a decade, I urge you to support HB 6635. The use of arbitrary breed lists in homeowners and renters insurance policies is harmful to consumers, and it does not make the public safer. As we've heard already today, it is my understanding that there is no reliable actuarial data that shows a difference in behavior based on dog breed. And anyway, visual identification of a dog's breed based on appearance is unreliable. I just wanted to read you a few lines from State Farm's website. I think they take an eminently sensible approach to this issue. That's why they're my insurer. State Farm writes, State Farm does not ask what breed of dog is owned when writing homeowner or renter's insurance. Just like humans, dogs are individuals. Every dog has a unique personality. While a dog's breed may dictate what the dog looks like, how a dog reacts to people or to situations isn't guaranteed by breed or type. Most bites or serious injuries are a perfect storm of situation and circumstance. In line with that approach from State Farm, since 2012, the American Bar Association has urged governmental bodies to adopt breed-neutral dangerous dog laws and to focus on the behavior of individual dogs and, more importantly, individual dog owners. As we've already heard today, Connecticut already has a statewide law in effect consistent with that ABA policy. That's my perspective as a lawyer. I wanted to finish with my personal perspective. I have experienced housing difficulties. These are the difficulties that can result when insurers, and as a logical consequence, landlords, rely on arbitrary breed lists. When I moved to Connecticut in 2021 for a temporary employment position, my family and I decided that it made most financial and personal sense for us to rent. But as owners of 2 rescued pit bull type dogs, after months of searching, we were unable to find suitable rental housing. Fortunately for us, we were financially able to change course and to purchase a home, but not every Connecticut family has that option. The use of arbitrary breed lists by insurance companies puts additional strains on families when they're searching for housing, and it can result in the relinquishment of family dogs to public animal shelters, which hurts families and children and the dogs, and puts additional burdens on our shelter system. Policy, both legislation and insurance policy, should not focus on arbitrary breed designations, but rather on the behavior of individual dogs and owners. For these reasons, I urge you to support HB 6635. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to have your expertise in this testimony today. We really appreciate you spending the time with us. Any questions from the panel? Great, thank you. Next up is Alyssa Miller Hurley, followed by Danielle Brown.
Thank you so much, members of the committee, for having us. I am Alyssa Miller Hurley. I represent the Pet Advocacy Network, and as the advocacy voice for the responsible pet community, the Pet Advocacy Network represents the interests, the expertise of retailers, companion animal suppliers, manufacturers, pet owners, and many others who are involved in the wide array of pet care aspects across the country. We've come here to speak in support of this bill. We believe that this bill would be a marked step forward. This legislation would remove the ability for an insurance company to deny coverage to a pet owner simply because they own a dog that the insurance company has deemed, based on breed alone, to be aggressive or dangerous. Behavioral experts recognize that the breed of a dog does not dictate its disposition, but rather it's the training and care of the dog's owners that determine its tendency towards aggressiveness. And by allowing insurers to deny coverage based on breed, this potentially deprives owners of loving animals, or in some cases could even provide could deny pet owners the ability to insure their home, leaving them helpless in the event of a disaster. The state of Connecticut has already taken steps to make sure that local municipalities cannot pass breed-specific dog ordinances through the enactment of Title VII, Chapter 98 of the Municipal Powers. And so it would make sense that this legislation is enacted as the next step to prevent what is really a backdoor breed-specific ban being enforced by insurers. All of us in the responsible pet care community don't just care about animals. We provide care for them daily, and we are dedicated to ensuring the appropriate care of animals is the primary focus of any law or regulation. And it's with that reason that we respectfully ask you to vote yes on HB 6635. We appreciate your consideration, and we are always looking for and welcoming the opportunity to work together to continue finding ways to meaningfully ensure the health and safety of companion animals, while also continuing to foster that healthy human to animal bond.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Representative Pavlik Tomato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering, and I don't know if some of the previous individuals testifying gave any of this, but are there any statistics on certain breeds that may have more tendencies than others or more incidents than others by state or nationally for that matter?
Sorry. There are some statistics that are out there. I don't have them in front of me. I do believe that one of the other representatives mentioned that at the moment, the highest rate of dog bites nationally is golden retrievers, and that is not purely, but partially because of the prevalence of golden retrievers. I can attest that many of the breeds that these insurance companies refuse to insure are not as high up on the list as some breeds like, for instance, Chihuahuas or even Huskies. And so I'm happy to follow up and provide some of that information, and would be more than willing to then continue the conversation.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I'm thinking as to what I've been bitten by, and it was a Husky and I think a Chihuahua or Pinscher or something. So that's, I definitely am along the line of, it isn't necessarily one breed, because of course any dog, any animal can bite, but I think the statistics would help us in pushing this forward. But is there also any information as far as any of such legislation affecting insurance rates or refusing to insure any of that in the other states that have passed this?
So we do know that, and that's, again, I can pull this statistics by state. We do know that in states that have passed breed specific legislation, it ends up being a financial burden on the state. And I can tell you that in one county alone, Prince George's County in Maryland, they spent around $250,000 a year to round up and destroy banned dogs. And so these types of policies are not only usually not fiscally responsible, but end up being a detriment both to the individuals and the localities. And again, that's something that I can happily pull for you in addition to the other statistics and send to you as a follow-up.
Thank you for that. And if your information, send that over so that way I know I'll have some follow-up questions. Is there any other, let's say if there isn't, if the legislation includes a flat, okay, no discrimination based on breed, is there any other language in there as far as, I don't know, bite history and maybe that's in there already anyways, but just any other way to carry it out to get reach the goal or get the protection or information that the insurance company needs without necessarily including animals that are not threatening and don't have any history of any bites or violence or anything like that.
Yeah, and so there are ordinances that are in place in some localities that potentially can be, the language can be tweaked and amended for insurance agencies, where rather than having any kind of breed specific legislation, what they've done is they've created classifications based on behavior based on reporting and based on training, where it may be a dog may be classified as a dangerous dog or a nuisance dog. But that's all, again, done based on behavior and patterns of history rather than the breed. And so one of the things that we have worked with states, localities, and municipalities on is developing that legislation to make sure that we are focusing on the well-being and safety of both the animal and the owner, but creating a system that takes into consideration the fact that there are going to be some unfortunate instances where something happens and somebody may get bit or something may happen to the animal. But we, again, want to always go back to the fact it's not due to necessarily the breed, it's due to behavior, it's due to training, and it's due to circumstance. And so by creating laws that take that into account, we've seen a much greater success, and we've also seen a greater incidence of both compliance and a reduction in, folks not being able to get housing, people not being able to move to a certain area, or in the worst case scenarios, people having to give up their animals because they are moving into a place where they can't get insurance because of the type of dog they own, or they can't live within that zip code because of the dog that they own.
Right. And I think with the housing crisis now, it's going to make it even more difficult. And I would hate to see that happen. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Yeah, and we're happy to provide some examples of that language as well in some states that have adopted it and some of the places we've worked with folks on, in addition to the statistics.
Thank you. Any further questions? Great. We'll move on to Danielle Brown, followed by Kim McLean.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Senator Cabrera and Representative Wood, Senator Wong, and Representative Pavlik-D'Amato, and members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee, thank you for seeing me today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Danielle Brown, and I am an insurance broker with Double Eagle Insurance Agency here in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I'm also a board member of Big I Connecticut, which was founded in 1889. Big I Connecticut is a statewide trade association representing independent insurance agents like me and brokers. We believe independent insurance agents serve customers best with trusted advice to protect what matters most to them. Big I Connecticut strongly supports HB 6621 excess and surplus lines insurance is specialty coverage that standard carriers do not cover. Typically, this includes unusual or high-risk exposures, or those with little or no claim history. E&S coverage offers substantial flexibility and is essential to promoting innovation and choice in the insurance market. It is one of the fastest growing markets for insurance. In order to place and renew coverage in the E&S market, an agent must first have coverage declined by 3 admitted insurance carriers. In practice, this is a significant time and paperwork burden on agents, particularly on renewals, where the agent has already once received the necessary declines. Eliminating the requirement to obtain 3 declines from admitted carriers when renewing a policy will streamline the process for obtaining coverage and allow agents to focus on what matters most, helping their customers. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Additionally, please feel free to contact Scott Hobson at Big I, our AVP of Government Relations at shobson@bigiconnecticut.org with any follow-up questions you might have. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Great. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Kim McLean, followed by Joanne Basile.
Good morning, Chairwoman Wood and distinguished members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee. And now for something completely different. I am here to testify on behalf of Raise Bill number 1013, an act concerning common interest ownership communities. My name is Kim McLean, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Connecticut Chapter of Community Associations Institute. We're part of a national organization with over 42,000 members. There are currently over 5,000 common interest communities in Connecticut with approximately 500,000 residents. Many of these associations have aging infrastructure concerns and often have woefully underfunded reserves. CAI Connecticut supports the creation of a report regarding reserve funding for Connecticut common interest ownership communities. As you are aware, Connecticut does not currently require reserve studies or the existence of reserve funds for our communities. However, if such a fund does exist, there is a requirement to report the details of that fund to the owners. Reserve funding for condominium association is required in 10 states. Our main query is how the Department of Housing intends to obtain data about reserve funding in Connecticut. There is a wide fluctuation in the size of our associations from 2 to 1,300 units, with most being on the small side. And although incorporated associations are required to complete an annual report with the Secretary of State, many fail to do so. Therefore, the contact information on record may be grossly out of date. Since the tragic Surfside tragedy in Florida in June of 2021, our national organization delved into better understanding the issues surrounding the collapse and determining enhanced best practices and options for future legislation. Over a 3-month period, more than 600 people participated in CAI's data and information gathering process, including reserve specialists, attorneys, insurance and risk management professionals, developers, engineers, architects, community association managers, and homeowner leaders. The recommendations in their 54-page report, which I've included as part of our testimony, details should be considered for adoption into state law to support the existing statutory framework for the development, governance, and management of common interest communities in Connecticut. The report also includes a summary of the actions other states have taken with respect to this issue. To the best of our knowledge, 4 states have formally created study groups regarding reserves, and several states have created informal working groups with their CAI legislative advisory committees and individual legislators. Furthermore, our national organization has many resources on this topic, including an area on their website devoted to condo safety and structural integrity. There's a link to those resources in my written testimony. And finally, the research arm of our national organization released a report on aging infrastructure in 2020. A former CAI-CT president served on the task force which created this report. Again, a link can be found in my written testimony. We welcome the opportunity to further discuss the contents of the National CAI report and perhaps avoid any unnecessary duplication of effort, as a great deal of groundwork has been laid by the National CAI team. We would also hope to be included in the process of creating the report by the Commissioner of Housing. Thank you so much for your time, and I will gladly answer any questions you may have.
Kim, thank you for testifying. I also think this bill is interesting and has some legs. Definitely has room for improvement. And I'm happy that you provided the 50-page report that we can reference as well for some additional ways to improve the bill. We're hearing 2 things. Either the common interest ownership community associations are working, which is rare, and a lot of that they're not working. So we definitely want to be here as a solution to help, not only making sure that there's, reserve funds, but that they're working in a way that benefits those that live in these communities. I'm sorry, would you like to respond?
No, I was just saying, as do we. I think the unfortunate reality is that many association units are sold as we'll keep your fees low, and part of keeping the fees low means not supporting putting money into reserve funding.
Correct. We're also finding that they are keeping fees extremely high and doing unnecessary repairs in order to move people out of those buildings. So I think there's a lot that we can look at with forming a study group. Any questions from the committee? Great. Thank you for your testimony. That was very helpful. Next up, we have Joanne Basile, followed by Stacy Ober.
Good morning, Senator Cabrera and Representative Wood. ranking members and vice chairs, honorable members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee. I'm Joanne Basile, Executive Director of Connecticut Votes for Animals. We're a grassroots animal advocacy organization. CVA is dedicated to improving and protecting the lives of Connecticut's animals by championing legislative changes at the Connecticut General Assembly and mobilizing animal supporters in every legislative district in the state. CVA strongly supports HB 6635. I actually do believe some of our supporters have already been in touch with some of the members of this committee. That's that they report back to me, by the way. CVA was very much involved in the 2013 law when the General Assembly enacted a non-discrimination policy concerning dog breeds in towns. The General Assembly looked at the data at that time that showed that there was little correlation between dog breed types and aggressive or troublesome behavior. They also understood, and this is really an important point, that discrimination policies against certain breeds might result in an indirect discriminatory policy against their human guardians. Fast forward 10 years, and what we know then has not changed. Today, there's just a little bit more accumulated data. The insurance industry, as you've heard, is relying on antiquated and arbitrary biases against any number of dog breeds. And even though there's no scientific evidence supported to that data that would prove certain dog breeds are inherently more inclined to bite than other breeds, the insurance industry has adopted these dog breed lists to the detriment of a large segment of the population. As a result, there are countless situations where homeowners or renters are faced with the option of excessively high premiums, no insurance coverage, or relinquishing their cherished pets. We believe that HB 6635, incorporating the language from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and the additional language that offers insurance companies the out that they need if a dangerous dog history data is provided on a specific dog. Not so very long ago, Connecticut, Hartford was known as the insurance capital of the world. For a brief moment, we can reclaim that title by enacting 6635. The policies embodied in 6635 are long overdue and are right for the citizens of Connecticut. We strongly support that bill. We urge the committee to move it forward. It's an opportunity for the General Assembly to allay the fears of thousands of dog owners trying to insure their home while keeping their best friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've heard a lot of this testimony today, so I feel like we've asked all the questions that we need. Are there any other questions from the committee? We go. Sure.
Just quick, briefly. Thank you. So does this affect more homeowners or landlords? Because you said homeowner, I think, well, maybe you were using it interchangeably with maybe like a renter.
Well, it's both. I mean, it's both homeowners who have homeowners policies, who have to get homeowners policies in order to ensure that they've got their obligations for their mortgages, and also renters. So it goes both ways. In fact, I was also it had happened to me that that I was denied an policy, not for one of the breeds on the list. Interestingly enough, I don't think they may be on the list, Jack Russells.
Okay.
So yeah. And I think also, Representative, you had asked before whether or not there was data. And my understanding is earlier that there's some data, but the actual data from the insurance industries is not very reliable. There's a tremendous amount of scientific data that shows about the relationship of dog breeds and behavior. What we know really is that dogs are affected by their environment, their human environment and other things. And that's really what shapes their, ultimately shapes their behavior and potential dog dangerousness. And what the bill does is that it says, let's look at that. And if that's there, then you can be denied a policy, and we get that, or you'll have to have an additional premium put on your policy.
I agree with you. I agree with the premise. I just think sometimes just like there are bad people, there are bad dogs. And I've seen it with my own eyes, even in a great environment. It happens. Just like people, right? So, but for the most part, I mean, I've rescued dogs for many, many years. So I know that environment does have a big part.
For the environment, and I think that we find that, you know, like, as you said, there are sometimes bad people where society has maybe failed that person. In this instance, perhaps people have failed that animal.
What about as far as just mixed breed is my last question. If with so many breeds being mixed now, is there then a change in coverage or how they treat it if
Not
the
that I-
Rottweiler or whatever is, because most are mixed breeds.
Well, I
now,
mean, that's
so-
the other peculiarity about what the insurance companies do. They'll say, well, that's, you know, instead of saying it's a mixed breed, well, that's clearly that dog has this particular breed in it and it's problematic. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here today. Last but not least, we have Stacy Ober.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to be with you this morning. My name's Stacy Ober. I am the New England Regional Manager for Government Relations for the American Kennel Club. The American Kennel Club was founded in 1884, and we are recognized as experts in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. We represent 5,000 clubs across the country, including 56 clubs in Connecticut, some of whom you've heard weigh in support of House Bill 6635. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank Rep. Nuccio for her continuing leadership on this issue. I thought I would use my time actually to respond to the question of whether we have actuarial data to justify these exclusionary policies based on breed. I did want to mention, because I am here as the manager for New England, in an attempt to predict which dog owners are likely to have dogs more likely to be involved in dog bite liability claims, Massachusetts enacted mandatory reporting by insurance companies back in 2019. And the information that was gathered was designed by the insurers themselves and did not meet any standard of valid risk analysis. So I thought I would just highlight for you all these same data elements were proposed to be added to the NCOIL Model Act and were rejected by NCOIL in determining again that they were not standard valid risk analysis predictors. So I thought I would just focus my testimony on that because the language was similar that was put forward, emulating the Massachusetts data collection. So in that language, it referred to a phrase of dog-related incident, and failing to define dog-related incident, our concern was that a dog could be responsible for any number of incidents that don't even involve personal injury as a result of a dog's aggressiveness. The reporting in Massachusetts also included reports of any claim. And so the data didn't flesh out, for instance, knowing whether or not a claim was actually paid, just that it was reported. It didn't distinguish whether or not the claim was for a minor injury. So that could have been suggesting greater problems than what was reality, and that claims can take more than a year to resolve, and they could be included in multiple reporting years because the case hadn't been closed yet. I know you've heard a lot about allowing visual breed identification of the dog being problematic and leading to misidentification and numerous errors. I wanted to just acknowledge that in the Massachusetts data collection, in fact, one of the breed options you could select for a dog that was involved in a dog-related incident was terrier. The American Kennel Club recognizes more than 200 breeds of dogs, and they are separated into groups, including terrier, in which there are 31 different breeds of terrier that are of different sizes and shapes. So we found that to be
Stacey, I'm so
problematic
sorry.
as well.
Stacy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your 3 minutes have eclipsed. Please summarize.
Thank you. The last piece was touched on earlier that I wanted to highlight as well. The data collection didn't compare dog owning households that might have had a claim submitted versus how many dog owner households were being insured and the number of breeds that are owned. So someone noted golden retrievers being the highest number. if you look at national statistics, that's likely a reflection of golden retrievers being a very popular breed. Others we saw on the list and the data collection included Labrador retrievers, which I think everyone would associate with a pretty friendly breed. So I just wanted to share some of the data analysis attempts in the event any of those parameters reflect guidelines that someone mentioned were available from the insurers that I've never seen, but would welcome an opportunity to look at as to whether or not they could be part of standardized risk analysis to validate underwriting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy, for your testimony. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for testifying today.
Thank you for your time.
I think that concludes our speakers today, Mr. Clerk. So let's adjourn this meeting. So to call it a chair. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.